Welcome back to Sip and Talk. I'm Joe.
Hi, everyone, and I'm Sunny.
And you've joined us for another deep dive.
Our old friend Micky read a book, took notes, and gave us a ton of information. He wants to share it with his fellow booze enthusiasts. We've also done quite a bit of research, articles, notes, all focusing on the science behind drinking alcohol.
Yeah, quite a stack. And a lot of it seems to draw from or connect to this Japanese book, The Science of Healthy Drinking, plus other research you pulled.
Exactly. So our goal today really is to unpack all of this for you. We want to sift through it and figure out what the science actually tells us about alcohol, its effects, and maybe how to approach it healthfully.
That's the idea. Like that book suggests maybe prolonging your drinking life, if drinking is something you do. It's about understanding the impact.
And what struck me looking through this is how it kind of pushes back against some common ideas we have about alcohol. Things you just sort of hear.
Oh, definitely. Like, the classic, a glass of red wine every night is good for you.
Right. Or that mixing beer and wine is the only reason you get a terrible hangover. Seems there's more to it.
Exactly. So we'll pull out the key stuff, look at some surprising bits, practical tips from all this info, understand what alcohol is doing inside your body, organ by organ.
And even touch on how different cultures view drinking, which is fascinating stuff.
Yeah. Think of this as like your crash course in being really informed on this topic, based on the science laid out here, not just old wives' tales.
Okay, let's get into it. Where should we start? Maybe with the main concepts from that Japanese book and the notes around it.
Sounds good. So the core idea isn't really go out and drink. It's more, if you do drink, here's what the science suggests for doing it in a, healthier way. Managing the risks, basically.
That framing feels important. It's not just yes or no, it's about the how.
Absolutely. And right off the bat, this material tackles some myths. That big one. Moderate daily drinking makes you live longer.
Yeah, like that glass of wine example.
Well, the research presented here basically says, nope, the evidence doesn't seem to support that when you really dig into it and control for other factors.
Huh. Okay. That's a pretty big claim to start with. Why do we think that myth is so persistent then? Does it say?
It doesn't really dive into the why it persists, but it strongly emphasizes that the large-scale data just doesn't show that causal link to increased lifespan. Any small potential benefit seems overshadowed by other risks.
Okay, wow, good to know. What about hangovers? The idea that darker drinks like whiskey are worse than vodka.
That one seems to have some truth to it, according to this, but it's probably less about the color itself and more about things called congeners.
Congeners?
Yeah, they're like other chemical compounds produced during fermentation and aging besides the alcohol itself. Darker drinks often have more of them. And the thinking is these congeners can make hangovers feel worse.
So it's the extra stuff, not just the alcohol percentage. Makes sense. What about tolerance? It feels so different person to person and it changes, right?
Definitely. That's a huge point here. Tolerance varies a lot. Genetics, weight, sex play a role. But a really key factor is age.
Ah.
Yeah, generally tolerance tends to decrease as you get older. And the main reason seems to be your liver's metabolism. Its ability to break down alcohol can just get a bit slower over time.
So the same drink might hit you harder at 50 than it did at 25?
Broadly speaking, yes. That's what this suggests. It stays in your system longer, potentially has a bigger effect.
Okay. And this stuff also talks about moderate drinking. How do they define that? Is there a number?
They try to tie it to how fast the liver works. The general consensus seems to hover around maybe 10 to 15 grams of pure alcohol per hour.
Which is like, what? It's a small glass of wine?
A beer, pretty much. A standard small wine, a single shot, a regular can of beer. They're all roughly in that ballpark, give or take.
So moderate isn't just a vibe. It's actually linked to your body's processing speed.
Exactly. If you drink faster than that rate, the alcohol starts queuing up in your blood. But, and this is crucial, while defining moderate helps understand metabolism, the health warnings really focus on the dangers of consistently going over those levels and the significant risks of excess drinking.
Gotcha. Okay, so beyond just the science facts, there are some really practical tips in here for drinking more healthily if you choose to drink. What stands out?
One of the biggest ones, and it makes scientific sense, is eating before or while you drink. Specifically, eating fats.
Fats? Really? Like bring on the cheese and olives?
Yes, exactly that. Peanuts, cheese, olive oil, avocado. The science here is that fats coat the stomach lining. This physically slows down how quickly alcohol gets absorbed into your bloodstream.
Ah, so it prevents that sudden rush, that big spike in blood alcohol.
Precisely, which helps you avoid getting drunk too fast and feeling worse later. It's a strategic move. Like they mentioned the Japanese izakaya habit, ordering edamame or something fried right away.
That's smart. So it's not just lining your stomach vaguely, it's a real tactic.
Totally. And another huge one is hydration. Drink water.
The classic advice.
For a very good reason. Alcohol makes you pee more, it dehydrates you. And dehydration is a massive factor in hangovers, the headache, the fatigue, that dry mouth feeling.
So the simple rule is just match every alcoholic drink with a glass of water.
That's the core advice. It sounds basic, but it makes a huge difference in combating dehydration.
And I saw a note about using sparkling water with lemon if you want to be discreet or feel like you're having something a bit fancier.
Yeah, clever social tip. And tied into that liver processing speed we mentioned is controlling how fast you drink.
Right. So sipping, not slamming.
Definitely not slamming if you want to minimize the negative effects.
Yeah.
Remember that 10-15 grams per hour limit. Drink faster, and your liver just can't keep up. The alcohol builds up, you get more intoxicated, and you put more stress on your body. Slower is better.
What about mixing drinks? You know, the whole beer before liquor, never sicker kind of thing. Is there anything to that?
Well, this material generally advises against mixing different types of alcohol or drinks with really different strengths within the same session.
Why is that?
It seems to make it harder for your body to process everything efficiently. You're throwing different concentrations of alcohol and those different congeners we talked about at your system all at once. It likely makes hangovers worse.
So sticking to one thing might actually be easier on your body the next day. Interesting.
That's what the science here points towards.
Right.
Other tips include, avoiding strong stuff on an empty stomach again, rapid absorption.
Right.
And maybe skip the booze right after a hard workout. It seems to interfere with muscle recovery.
Oh, okay. Didn't know that one.
And a big one, avoid drinking a lot right before bed.
But what about a nightcap? Doesn't that help you sleep?
It might make you feel sleepy and knock you out faster, sure, but the information here is really clear. Alcohol seriously messes with the quality of your sleep, especially REM sleep, which you need for feeling rested and for your brain to function well.
So you might pass out, but you're not getting good restorative sleep.
Exactly. You wake up feeling groggy for a reason.
Okay, those are super useful, practical things.
Yeah.
Now, let's dig into what alcohol actually does inside the body, beyond just feeling tipsy. This stuff gets pretty detailed.
It really does. And it's way more than just feeling drunk. Fundamentally, alcohol acts as a depressant on your central nervous system. It slows things down.
Like coordination, reaction time.
The judgment, too. And as the amount increases, you go through stages. Relaxation, then loss of control, maybe blackouts. And in very high doses, they can actually depress vital functions, leading to coma or even death.
Scary stuff. Let's break it down by organ, based on what's in here. The brain first.
Okay, the brain. Short term, you get the impaired judgment, maybe memory lapses or blackouts. Long term, though, consistent heavy drinking is linked to actual structural changes in the brain, memory loss, higher risk of depression.
And addiction, right? Messing with brain chemistry.
Yeah, especially the dopamine reward pathway.
Yeah.
That's central to how addiction develops. But there was also a really striking study mentioned here.
About lower levels of drinking.
Yes. Published in Nature Communications, I think it was 2022.
Yeah.
Huge study looking at MRI scans found that even people drinking what we might consider moderate amounts, like 1 or 2 drinks a day, showed measurable shrinkage in both gray and white matter in their brains.
Shrinkage? Seriously?
Yeah. And the notes point out this reduction was comparable to the brain aging by about 2 or 3 extra years compared to non-drinkers.
Wow. Okay, that definitely challenges the, 1 or 2 is fine, maybe even good idea.
It strongly suggests there might be effects on the brain, even at levels many people think are harmless. That's the key takeaway here. Now, the liver, that's the main process plant, right?
Yeah, we always hear about liver damage.
Because it does the heavy lifting, metabolizing most of the alcohol. This info lays out the progression pretty clearly. Even one big binge can cause fat to build up in the liver. That's called fatty liver or steatosis.
Okay.
Drink more regularly, and you risk alcoholic hepatitis inflammation of the liver. The final stage is cirrhosis, which is scarring, and that's permanent, irreversible damage.
But the first 2 stages, can they heal?
Often, yes. The material emphasizes that fatty liver and alcoholic hepatitis can often be reversed or significantly improved if you stop drinking. But once you hit cirrhosis, that scarring doesn't go away.
And there's a nasty byproduct created during processing.
Right, acetaldehyde. When your liver breaks down the alcohol, ethanol, it produces this stuff, acetaldehyde. And it's actually more toxic than the alcohol itself.
More toxic. Yikes.
Yeah. It's classified here as a carcinogen something that can cause cancer. It's a major factor in liver damage, but also increases the risk for other cancers too.
Okay, moving down the line. The gut, stomach, intestines.
Alcohol irritates the lining all the way down. It ramps up stomach acid, especially if you drink on an empty stomach. That can lead to gastritis, reflux, even ulcers.
Ouch.
And long term, it's linked to a higher risk of cancers in the mouth, throat, esophagus, stomach, and colon. Plus, it can mess with the balance of bacteria in your gut.
What about the heart? That's where the red wine discussion always comes up.
True. Okay, cardiovascular effects.
Sure.
Short term, especially with a lot of alcohol, it can increase your heart rate and blood pressure.
Okay.
Chronic heavy drinking.
Yeah.
Clearly linked to sustained high blood pressure, weakening of the heart muscle, cardiomyopathy, and a higher risk of stroke.
But the red wine thing, any truth to the benefits?
This material acknowledges there's been some research suggesting potential benefits, particularly with moderate red wine intake, but it's very cautious. It stresses these potential benefits are controversial, often small, and likely outweighed by the known risks of alcohol, especially cancer risk.
So it's not a green light to drink wine for heart health?
Yeah, definitely not the main message here. It leans heavily toward caution. The proven risks are significant. The pancreas is another organ that takes a hit.
Right? What happens there?
Heavy drinking, especially binging, is a major risk factor for acute pancreatitis. That's sudden, severe inflammation. It's incredibly painful and can be really dangerous.
And if it keeps happening?
It can lead to chronic pancreatitis, damaging the pancreas permanently, affecting digestion, and increasing your risk of developing diabetes.
And the immune system. Does alcohol affect that too?
It does. Generally suppresses it. Even just one session of heavy drinking can temporarily weaken your immune response, making you more likely to catch infections. Long term, it compromises your overall ability to fight off diseases.
Man, it really seems to touch almost every part of the body. And the cancer risk. This material seems to really hammer that home.
It's one of the strongest points made. It highlights that the World Health Organization classifies alcohol as a Group 1 carcinogen.
Group 1. What else is in that group?
Things like tobacco smoke, asbestos, stuff known definitively to cause cancer in humans.
Wow.
And the key message is, the risk is tied to the total amount of alcohol you consume over your lifetime. There's a study mentioned from The Lancet in 2018 that concluded there's essentially no safe dose of alcohol when it comes to cancer risk.
No safe dose? That's pretty unambiguous. It means even a small amount carries some risk, however tiny.
That's the implication. The risk definitely goes up the more you drink, but it doesn't seem to start at zero. Cancers specifically linked include mouth, throat, esophagus, liver, breast, and colon cancer.
And they cited a global statistic.
Yeah, also from The Lancet, 2022, I think. Around 2.8 million deaths worldwide each year attributed to alcohol use. It's a staggering number.
It really is. And isn't there something about genetics? Like some people are at much higher risk.
Yes, the ALDH2 deficiency. You might know it as the Asian flush.
Oh, right, when people turn bright red.
Exactly. It's a genetic variation, really common in people of East Asian descent, maybe affects about half the population. It means their bodies are much less efficient at breaking down that toxic acetaldehyde we talked about.
It builds up faster.
Much faster. And that buildup causes the flushing, nausea, headache. But crucially, a Harvard study mentioned here found that people with this deficiency who drank even moderately have a massively higher risk, like 6 to 10 times higher, of developing esophageal cancer.
Whoa. So if you get that flush reaction, it's not just uncomfortable, it's a serious warning sign from your body about increased cancer risk from alcohol, based on this research.
That's precisely the connection being drawn here. Understanding that genetic predisposition is really important for assessing your personal risk.
Okay, so we've gone through the internal chemistry, the biology, but alcohol is so much more than just ethanol in a bottle, isn't it? It's woven into cultures all over the world. This material touches on that too.
Yeah, it shifts gears a bit to look at alcohol as like a social tool, a way to express emotion, part of rituals. And it's amazing how different its role is depending on where you are.
Let's start with Japan, since the main book is from there. They talk about nominecation.
Right. Nominecation. It's this blend of nomu, to drink, and communication. It's the idea that drinking together, especially colleagues after work, is really important for building trust, bonding, saying things you might not say at the office.
Almost like a required social activity in some workplaces.
Right. It can feel that way, yeah. And there are strict rituals waiting for the kanpai toast, pouring drinks for your seniors first. It reinforces the group dynamic.
And they mentioned that funny image of salarymen, maybe totally smashed, but still navigating the trains home super orderly.
Huh. Yeah, it's a kind of cultural quirk, isn't it? Drunk, but orderly.
Yeah.
Very different from, say, the U.S.
How so? What stands out about the U.S. perspective in these notes?
Well, the legal age is 21, which is higher than many places. But then you have this huge culture of underage drinking, especially around college. Alcohol often seems tied to individual freedom, self-expression, like happy hour being your time to unwind.
Less focus on pouring for others, more about getting your own drink.
Generally, yeah. And the historical stuff is interesting, too. Prohibition in the 1920s.
When alcohol was illegal.
Yeah, nationally.
Yeah.
Didn't stop people drinking, just drove it underground into speakeasies, which, ironically, kind of fueled organized crime, but also led to a boom in cocktail creativity, trying to make rough, illegal booze taste better. You see echoes of that history even today, like with the Bourbon Trail.
Fascinating. How about Taiwan? What's the picture there?
Taiwan apparently has a really strong toasting culture, especially at big dinners or weddings. There can be intense social pressure to drink. Sometimes even that line, if you don't drink, you're disrespecting me.
Oof, that sounds high pressure.
It definitely can be. But there's also mention of a newer trend, especially with younger folks, moving towards what they call a microbuzz culture.
Microbuzz?
Yeah, like appreciating craft cocktails, maybe natural wines, in cool bars, more about a taste and the vibe than just getting hammered. And there was this interesting observation about women sometimes ordering drinks at events, but not really finishing them, like the ritual of participating is key.
Being part of the social scene is the point. And they mentioned a beer cooling trick.
Oh yeah, the night market classic. Spitting bottles in ice water to cool them super fast. Genius. And the unique traditions around Kidman sorghum liquor too.
Okay, last stop, Spain. Alcohol seems really integrated into daily life there.
Totally. Having wine or sangria with a meal, it's just normal. Leisurely, not rushed. And tapas culture, hopping between bars, having small bites, small drinks, encourages slow social sipping over hours.
Very different from places where maybe drinking is more about quick intoxication.
Exactly. Though they also mentioned botellón. It's basically big outdoor gatherings, often young people, drinking cheaper booze, bought from shops before maybe heading to clubs later. It's a social thing, tied to cost and just hanging out together.
And there was a festival.
Yes. La Batalla de Vino, the wine battle, where people literally drench each other in thousands of liters of red wine. Apparently, it started over an old land dispute centuries ago.
That sounds incredibly sticky. And they mentioned sherry, the special pouring technique. These cultural bits really show how diverse our relationship with alcohol is.
And the psychology behind it is interesting, too. Is it about social trust, like maybe in Southern Europe, or more stress relief, like sometimes in East Asia or the U.S.? There's also that tricky link mentioned between heavy drinking and ideas of masculinity in some cultures, making it harder for men to admit they have a problem.
But an important point was raised, too. Often, the happiness people get from these social drinking occasions might come more from the social connection itself, the talking, the laughing, belonging, than from the alcohol's actual effects.
That's a really powerful thought. The connection is the real prize.
So pulling all this together, the deep science, the practical tips, the body impacts, the cultural stuff, why does going through all this information you gathered actually matter for you listening right now?
I think it boils down to being empowered by understanding. It's not telling you whether to drink or not. It's about taking all these details from the science of healthy drinking, from the other research you found, and giving you a clear, science-based picture so you can make informed choices.
Right. It's not just about drinking more or less, it seems. It's about understanding the how, the when, the with what, if you do choose to drink, being more mindful about it.
And knowing the real health risks, the cancer link, the brain effects, the liver strain, those genetic factors, it doesn't have to be just scary. It means you can actually manage those risks consciously. You can move past the old myths and base your decisions on what we currently understand from the science.
We've covered a lot, from tiny molecules like acetaldehyde up to global cultural rituals, from MRI scans showing brain changes to tips about eating peanuts.
And maybe the biggest takeaway, the most challenging idea from digging into all this, is how the scientific view presented here really questions if any level of drinking is truly risk-free, especially for long-term health like cancer and brain aging, even levels we used to think of as moderate.
That definitely challenges the older, maybe more comfortable narratives.
Understanding that nuance, that even moderate drinking likely isn't harmless, seems like the most crucial thing for navigating alcohol thoughtfully in your own life going forward.
Definitely something to chew on as you think about everything we've discussed today. Thanks to our old friend Micky for his materials and notes.
Yeah.
It's no wonder we promote his channel every episode. Please give him some support, and don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. Bye!